Hello, everybody. I'm Sonali Sokal, and on behalf of PRPOI, welcome to another Saturday session. This is a session this time on new media, and we have three wonderful panelists joining us. We'd also like to take a moment to thank our media partner, PR Moment, for partnering us in this. And I'd like to also extend a very warm thanks to my co-founders, Tarunjit Ratan and Pooja Trehan Dhameja, without whom these sessions are not possible. Our session today is really interesting. We have three panelists, three women, three founders of new media portals. And we want to understand from them how we get to negotiate this world of new media, what it means for the media universe itself, what is their vision to form these portals, how they intend to bring these to the general public, how are they growing them, what has been their journey, and how we as PR professionals can partner with them. So without further ado, I'm going to start introducing our panelists. The introductions are going to be in alphabetical order. So my first panelist is Juhi Garg. My bad. My first panelist is actually Aekta Kapoor, and she is the founder and editor of eShe magazine, an independent women's magazine and blog based in India and Canada. The blog and the magazine celebrate extraordinary stories of women around the world. It's currently ranked 23 among the top women's magazines in the world by Feedspot, and it has touched the lives of millions of women and men worldwide since its launch in 2017. Ekta has been a journalist. Her pieces regularly appear in some of India's top media platforms, including the Economic Times, Open, and Money Control. And after a long career in fashion and media, Ekta now focuses on social justice and personal development through her writing and her talks. I'm here to welcome Ekta to the panel. Hi, Ekta.
Hi, Sonali. I'm so happy to be here.
So are we very happy to have you, and allow me to introduce our next panelist. This is Juhi Garg, and Juhi is a journalism graduate from Delhi University, a master's in corporate law from National Law School of India, Bangalore, and a grade 5 Western classical jazz piano degree holder from Royal Schools of Music, London. She co-founded ED Times, a youth media startup rated as the top 10 youth blogs worldwide for second year in a row, focused on creating responsible content while trying to change the reading habits of young India. Juhi also leads the Journalism and New Media Task Force at CII Delhi's Executive Council 2020 and is a member of CII Northern Region Committee on Innovation, Startup and Entrepreneurship 2020-2021. Let's welcome Juhi here.
Hi, Sonali. Thank you so much for
Hi,
having me.
Juhi. Thank you for being here with us. And I am now going to introduce our third panelist. Shreya Soni, aka Stevie, is an alumna of Delhi University and Warwick Business School. She started her career at Ernst & Young London as a management consultant, specializing in organization design, change management, and advising global giants on how to streamline processes for greater efficiency. As a new service offering and category altogether, Shreya founded the country's first secretly run dining club. After running this establishment in incognito mode for 4 years, she pivoted the model into making DSSE one of the leading voices in marketing and brand storytelling. Established in 2013 as India's first secret supper club, DSSE has grown to become India's leading experiential marketing agency. As agile and creative problem solvers, DSSE builds powerful B2C marketing solutions online and offline for brands across the industry. Let's welcome Shreya on our panel. Hi, Shreya. Very nice to be with us.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, and I am so excited to be sharing this panel with three women whom I have personally seen grow whatever their vision has been into something that is today recognized across so many spaces, across different industries, and each of you has stuck to a special niche, a special vision, and that is coming to fruition now and showing us a very new way to be in this media world.
Thank you.
So I'm going to begin with asking you all a few questions. So the first question, of course, is very, very obvious. And the obvious question is, what prompted this shift? What prompted you, each one of you, if you could share with us that story or that moment when you decided to start your own platform? So, Ekta, we'll begin, girls, ladies, if you don't mind, we are going to stay in that same alphabetical order. So, I'm going to begin with Ekta first.
Yeah. So, Sonali, I started eShe in 2017. This is after many years of working in the fashion media, mostly fashion and luxury magazines. But I had made the switch to online media in 2014 because I realized that digital is the future. And I thought the best way to learn something is by doing it. So I joined a media house to launch their fashion platform. It's one of India's largest media houses, Dainik Bhaskar. And it was quite an explosive learning experience because we were not just in English, but we were also in Hindi and Gujarati. So it gave me a huge insight into audiences across different languages. And that also triggered the spark in me to do something more meaningful because ultimately, whether it's a fashion magazine or it's a fashion website, there are certain parameters that you have to fit into, and especially when it comes to women. I wasn't very comfortable with the kind of stories that we ended up doing, for the purpose of getting hits, and that is what ultimately drives a lot of platforms these days is hits, and I refuse to be defined by my numbers, and I wanted to do stories that are valued for the, what the value of the story should not be just the numbers, but it should be something that can be a chronicle of our times. It can be something that I can be proud to put my name on it, that fueled my desire. And the other thing that fueled me was that I was kind of tired of photoshopping women all the time, and I wanted to show us all in our true colors. And I wanted the next generation of girls to feel confident about who they are. I have two daughters, and they were also kind of disillusioned by the fashion magazines, and they were like, "Mom, we can never fit in your magazine." So that was something that drove me, that let me come out with a magazine about real women without photoshopping their flaws. And it's also healthier for boys to see normal women and not to have these unrealistic expectations of what women are supposed to be like. So that was the other thing that drove me. So bringing together both my journalistic background and my interest, and also my experience in digital and print media, that is why I launched eShe. And it's a mix of all of that. So it's a digital product, it's a print product, and it's also a website and a blog where we do share experiences and personal journeys of women. They're welcome to contribute on the blog. So that's essentially how the journey began. And yes, I've been following my vision, I've been following my passion since then, and it's here. I mean, I'm here now and I'm still here. So that's how it's been.
So, more power to you on that. And Juhi, we come to you. Tell us your story.
Ekta, amazing. I mean, amazing vision behind what you're doing, and so true. I think I resonated with that in the youth sector. Uh, there was a lot of fun content that was being done. There was a lot of mindless content that was being done for young people in India, and what we call the BuzzFeedy generation. It's great to have it for a while, but I really saw a gap between having smart cerebral content still done in an entertaining, engaging way, the millennial way that they can consume it without feeling overburdened by the technicality of that content, and that is why ED Times became generalist youth media, where we can still talk to you about good stories, good content, things that matter, politics, social opinions, but we're going to do it in a way that you're still going to get entertained and take something back at the end of the story. You're not going to feel that this was just mindless scrolling. It's going to definitely add value to your life. You're going to learn something. Also, there was the Facebook generation where everybody was so angry. They were so channeled into letting their emotions and opinions out about anything and everything. And most of them were just based on emotions. Those opinions were not really based on fact checking. They were not based on reading the holistic side of the entire story, the right wing and the left wing, and then coming to an opinion. They just thought that the next person did something back. Oh, bad, let me go on Facebook and rant about it. And I think that created a lot of herd mentality. That's also what ED Times tries to break, that when young people do a story, the first thing they need to do is read all sides of the coin, and then come to an opinion, and then back it up with 3 to 4 justifications as to why you're doing it. That was the whole idea of ED Times. And yes, it's been 5 years for me. The original founder of ED Times is my brother. He started it as a really young person because he's found this gap truly in the content department for young people. And today he's a private equity corporate lawyer. He's definitely gone on some different tangent, but he's left this to me, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the space because every day there's something new to do in the media space, especially in the new media space, because you have so much of there are just no rules, right? So you make your own rules, and you make your own ethics charter. Everything is left on you. So it's really a lot of responsibility, but a lot of fun at the end of the day. So that's me.
Thank you, Juhi. And you are echoing. I just saw the social dilemma recently. I don't know how many of you saw it, but so much of what you said is echoing that. We'll probably come back to that in the middle of this conversation at some point. Shreya, I am dying to hear. You have such an interesting journey. You run that thing for 4 years, incognito mode. And I remember getting those TV newsletters from Stevie, and I used to wonder, who is Stevie? So now we want to hear this in the words of Stevie herself.
I wish, Sonali, that I had as sexy an answer and a story as Ekta and Juhi. Like, their stories are like hugely inspiring and sitting on something solid. So I'd actually moved back to Delhi, and I came back to a city that, in fact, I hadn't called home for, close to a decade. And I came back to a city that was kind of bursting at its cultural seams. It was really interesting because, suddenly we had this fascinating side, a cultural kind of side to the city that I really enjoyed. However, I saw this big gap in quality conversation. And I say this with no disrespect. I think like there were pockets of conversation happening all across the city. And I feel like the common thread was this complaint about, but where are all these like-minded, curious, and amazing people? And then the solution would be, oh, they're actually in Bombay. And I'm like, what? I'm not flying to Bombay to have like this great conversation. And I was like, so many of us seem to be really interesting, but seem to have this common problem. So I think boredom was like my core genesis of what gave birth to then erstwhile Delhi Secret Supper Club. And the premise was really basic. I come from a family where food is a very big unifier, and it's kind of like this, leveler in our home. So the social experiment of sorts was fairly simple. I would sit and research people from different kind of like backgrounds, fields, walks of life. And true to being a management consultant, all of it kind of like sat on a spreadsheet, and then I would kind of like cross-analyze and cut out, slice out that data to try and find some pockets of kind of that common thread. And the premise was, can we create a safe, legitimate platform where there was no agenda to conversation, where there was no kind of concerns about safety, because I was cognizant, being a woman in a city where at least like say, safety does come as a forefront concern. And I didn't want the conversation kind of to be reduced to a dating platform, even though it's a very important conversation. And then the construct was really simple. How can you get like-minded, curious strangers under the same roof with this common unifier being food and drink to help break the ice? And hopefully they kind of like leave the premises as, potential kind of like co-founders, friends, banter, kind of whatever it is. And through the course of that discovery of that social construct that we started building, we realized that this would become a really interesting platform where you can bridge that gap between the producer and the maker and the end consumer in like a really kind of like cohesive, layered, detailed fashion. And then through that course of the journey, of course, the first 4 years, I ran it anonymously because I come from a school of thought where it should not matter who's running the product if you like the product. It's always product over, the founder, and it should be irrelevant who's running it as long as you like the product. So as a kind of myth-breaking exercise of sorts, I said, cool, we're going to do it anonymously, which basically meant me being in disguise, me begging my mother to wear a wig and driving her to these locations for like a recce and all of that. And we didn't get on one phone call, one Skype call for 3 years. It was in our 4th year where finally a client said, listen, man, I'm cutting you too big a check, and it's kind of dangerous if I don't know who is this for. And I think at the fourth year, we were at that juncture where we said, I think it's about time that we stop living behind the scenes. We've kind of like done a kind of product market test, and it fit. And then, the last 4 years, we've been kind of out in the open, and again, lesser stress on who runs it. Our work kind of keeps doing dabbling between online and offline solutions for any brand under the sun.
That's really interesting to know. And now I finally know the whole story. Thank you for that. So I want to ask you, and I hear all three of you say being very definitive of the vision with which you started this. So tell us, when it comes to curating content on your sites, on your blogs, on your e-signs, how do you choose that content? What is the criteria that you have? Is there some parameters? Because like you said, Juhi, you have to make your own ethics, you have to chart your own territory. It's uncharted. So how does that work for each one of you? Ekta, we begin with you, and then we request the rest?
Yeah, so in my case, because I was already coming from a print journalism background, I have followed a lot of the principles of print journalism, even while launching eShe, though it started out first as a blog in 2014 and then later as a magazine in 2017. So for me, the content, it's a very organic kind of a growth, and it's a kind of a system where I follow the same journalistic principles that I would if I was doing a story in a newspaper or in a print publication. But at the same time, I have designed the content for web viewing from the day one. So for instance, at that time when I started, magazines would have, a magazine has a different headline, for instance. When you put it on the web, you can't put the same headline. But when I started out, a lot of people were still doing that, and many are still doing that. So they just pick up the same story from the magazine and they put it online, and they don't bother to change the headline. But it doesn't work. So in my case, what I did is I started working backwards from day one. So every story was designed that this is going to go up on the website eventually. So it's written in a certain format, following the SEO, whatever is going to optimize the search engine optimization rules, Google search rules. So we design the stories like that even before it goes into the magazine. And actually, I think that works pretty well, because what you write for the web is usually more readable, and then it works as good if it's in the magazine. Nobody can really tell the difference. So it's kind of, for me, it was a way of changing the consumer's behavior, getting them used to reading digital magazines. And then, of course, lockdown happened, and now everybody's forced to read digital magazines. So in that sense, it's kind of worked out that I was already there, and it's been part of my routine, and it's been part of my systems from day one, that we release the print, we release the digital, and we go online at the same time. So we have all kinds of readers. So in terms of curating content, I stick to good stories. For me, stories of interesting women is the primary thing. That's my biggest goal, is to give a platform to women, is to amplify women's voices, and to feature women doing interesting things. And I continue to do that. But the format, yes, I have adapted my format from the fashion magazine background. Now I'm more channeled towards the blog format, and towards the online, and to the digital reading landscape, being available on eShe, being available on Magster. So I've made myself flexible in that sense. And being as a curator of content, it's very simple for me, because my rules are very defined, and I like being in this space. This is what I want to do. And I don't do a story I don't want to do. So that's the best thing about being an independent media publication. There's nobody sitting on your head with certain ideologies or certain business interests, and you have to do those kind of stories. I don't. I do it if I want to do it. So that's how it is.
Amazing. I think that's the biggest motivation to do what you really want to do. What about you, Juhi? How do you select content and curate?
So for us, content is a little challenging, the curation and the selection of the story ideas. Why? Because we are competing in a way with mainstream media, right? So a news website would have already come out with that news. We cannot do that piece of news because we are not a primary news website. We're not breaking news. We don't have our own satellites. We don't have our own stringers. So if we are dependent on news that has already come out and we do the same news, why would anybody read it on ED and not on an NDTV or a TOI or a HT? So one is that we stay away from news which has already been covered. Now, if we are providing an angle to it or a perspective to it or a youth opinion on it, which is definitely standing out, number one. Number two, it's relatable to young people. Number three, is there something in the story that they can take back? Does it matter to their lives? Does it have any impact on them? If those 3-4 parameters and the fact that it has to be cerebral at some level, there has to be some level of smart content, responsible content in it. If that is satisfied, we go ahead with the story. Also, because we do only around 7 pieces of new content a day, each piece has to have, either some fun element in it or some smartness, and of course we try and combine the two. So you would see that when it comes to changing reading habits, what we try and do is that we might do one story which is on memes. Okay, Nirmala Sitharaman calls millennials responsible for letting the economy down. But we're not going to do that story because it's already come out. We're going to do the top 10 memes that came on Twitter for it. Now, the purpose for doing that, even though you might say that that's typical BuzzFeed content, is enabling changing reading habits. If we get a reader who reads the same stuff on different websites, but comes to us and reads those memes, the first thing he's going to read is what happened. Why did she blame young people for letting the economy down? What is the economy GDP rate? What really happened? So first you're going to take that, and then of course to make it more engaging and make it more there, like, we'll add those memes. So that's where we are trying to really find stories which can combine the two aspects and enable people from reading semi-dumb stories to, let's say, semi-smart stories, in our view. Again, not being disrespectful to anyone, but we feel young people can really do with some better content reading.
I agree with you on that, Juhi. I'm completely on board on that. Shreya, dying to hear your viewpoint on how you curate content.
So, I want to actually address one thing, which I find sometimes, it's part of like the larger discussion. I feel there is space in the sun, under the sun, for all kinds of content. So, for someone who actually does not necessarily derive much joy or interest out of 150 character words, like an entire story, I get nothing from it. But at the same time, I'm also someone who derives great amount of joy from dog memes and BuzzFeed content. So, I feel like there's space for anyone and everyone, as long as they're kind of like staying true to their core values and doing it in a fashion that is as authentic to them. We're not going to talk about kind of like TV journalism here, so we all agree on that. In terms of how we do it, just to kind of offer some context here. So for the first, I want to say 2.5, 3 years, we were kind of like fairly offline focused. So, in terms of kind of like that version of storytelling, or that kind of like the media that we were employing was strictly kind of like based on any kind of offline touch point. Now, we were already an outlier in like the industry, and sometimes that's not helpful because you don't have any kind of a brand Bible, or you don't have any case studies to fall back on. But in so many ways, it outweighs that, because you get to define those rules. So as Juhi said, you get to build your own charter. You get to build your own kind of like brand Bible of sorts. So when we kind of started attaching online storytelling and like other forms of content to whatever we were doing in terms of like bridging the consumer and the maker, and educating the consumer more about brand stories, we were fairly focused. So there are two kind of ways of doing it, right? You can like throw 1,000 strands of pasta on the wall and something sticks, or you can just be fairly kind of like focused and blinkered in your approach. And we said, we're going to throw these 5 strands of spaghetti on the wall today, and we're going to hope all 5 of them kind of stick on the wall. So we did that. And at that point in time, and like, we have like these legends like Ekta and Juhi, and they've been doing this for way longer. But what we kind of did was, since we were more in like the food, alcobev, lifestyle, that kind of a space, a lot of the storytelling that was being employed at that point in time was the whole who, what, where, how much, where, I mean, where to kind of like buy, etc. And I was like, what? I'm not doing that, because you're not really telling me anything about that brand story. And at that point, like I said before, Delhi, I mean, so many cities across the country, there were compelling, solid stories emerging from these segments. And I think they deserved a little bit more than that whole, derive that what, why, who from Press Note plus Zomato, basically. So we kind of said, okay, we're going to do our version of long form. I mean, we're nowhere close to long form. I feel like only New Yorker is. But we said we're going to do a medium to long form kind of like narration of brand storytelling online and offline. And since it wasn't hugely employed, at least in our sectors, we said, you know what, they don't have anything to compare it with, so we can make our own rules. And if it works, it works. So I remember, and just to give you some metrics here, when we kicked off our online blog about brand storytelling, I remember our initial stats were like 15, 20K kind of like hits. And we kind of said that since we didn't have, kind of like targets or pressures from an external source riding, kind of looking over our shoulder, we gave ourselves a solid 12-month timeline. And we said, you know what, if it grows and we find that niche market and that kind of loyal reader who is interested in this form of storytelling and kind of like that narrative, great. And if not, then you know what, our spaghetti didn't stick and we'll throw another 5 strands and like see what works. And in a matter of 10 months, we kind of like, slowly but surely grew to our million kind of hits. And that kind of, and I know like impressions and hits and all of that, after a point, it has to be kind of just parked aside and not given that much importance. But the fact of the matter is that that data suggested that there is a growing audience that wants to read more than the what, why, who, where, how much, and wants to know more about the behind the scenes of the makings of the brand and actually someone's opinion on what's in it for me. So, I feel like we started employing that logic with content online and offline.
Very interesting for us to know that, Shreya. And I'm going to come back to you, Ekta, with a question because you mentioned this. And that's a question I'm going to address to, sorry.
I just wanted to agree with Shreya's initial point that there is space for every kind of content under the sun. I totally agree with that. And also our purpose here is not really to demean any kind of content. We just thought that maybe there was space and we could club the two, but you're very right. Every kind of content serves a certain purpose and there is a reader for that. Yeah.
I'm sure there is a leadership. We are very lucky. We live in a very diverse country with all sorts of people. I mean,
Sorry, Sonali, I just want to say, Juhi, by the way, every BuzzFeed article around like food tastings, I'm like the #1 reader. I like it. That's why.
No, I'm sure we've all loved those memes on Rasode mein kaun tha or Rashi kahan gayi. So I plead guilty to those as well. Okay, so I'm going to come back to a slightly more serious question now. And I'm going to begin it with you, Ekta. And that is, and you mentioned this, and you said that as a person very long career in journalism before starting her own independent media, you work with certain rules. So what are the rules? We understand that when somebody is coming out with a publication or a newspaper or a magazine, they have to adhere to certain rules and regulations. There are certain legalities in place. New media is a bit in that sense like the Wild Wild West, yet there are no particular, to my knowledge at least, particular guidelines that have been put there, except for very generic guidelines on what should be put in a public space. How are you as new media negotiating that? Is there, and I've heard even Juhi mention that, is there some code of ethics that you adhere to? Is there something that is there? And can you also educate us? Is there something that you adhere to even in terms of government regulations? Is there something that you have to keep in mind in terms of rules and regulations is what we are very curious to know.
Yeah, in our case, our stories are also syndicated to other news websites. Like, as Juhi said, I don't want to compete with anybody because I'm not in that space, but I can be a content provider for them. And they are happy to take the content from us because they know we've done our due diligence behind it. So without, thinking twice, they know that they can carry those those stories. We syndicate to Money Control. We were syndicating to CNBC TV18 in the past. We also have our stories being translated in Malayalam on Azhimukham. My Malayalam is not good, so I'm sure I didn't pronounce that properly. But our stories are translated there. So they do pick up stories from us because they trust us. And the reason is that we treat each story as an original. Every single story that goes in eShe has been reported by somebody. We've done our research behind it. It's original. We do not copy paste anything from the internet. We do get a lot of press releases and we use it for information, but everything has to be originally written. This is also for SEO purposes, and it's also because of journalistic ethics, that if I'm providing a product, there has to be something different in me that's not there in anywhere else. And there has to be a perspective. In my case, it's the female gaze. So there has to be a perspective there, which I'm offering you, which is not going to be there on 100 other platforms. So every single story that goes into eShe is individually reported. In fact, I've traveled long distances to report some stories. And I'm happy to do that because I find that to be my purpose. I find that to be my job. And so even if we get a lead about something, someone sends me a link, okay, consider this woman's story, it's really interesting. We're not going to take your word for it, we're going to go there and report it independently, and we're going to report what we saw. And because I'm a relatively niche, smaller platform, I have the luxury of time and space to do that. I don't have to come out with the 20 stories a day. I've never kept that rule for myself. So we're happy with 1 or 2 stories a day, and we do it well.
Okay, thank you for that. Interesting to hear. What about you, Juhi? How do you handle these?
I think we
or negotiate
in terms of semi-news content that we do, we are not very different from anything which is already there on print media or the web version of print media, because given the kind of notices that we get based on our stories from brands that, oh, you need to pull this down, a cease and desist, and it's defamatory and blah and blah and blah. If you're writing against a malpractice of a hospital and the hospital is ready to sue you, one, you know that you are trying to make an impact, and two, you know that you have to be very careful of what you really put out there. So for us, you will see that every story ends with at least 3 to 4 high authority, diverse sources at the end, and that's the kind of credibility we want to build. We want to tell you that our story is well researched from all angles, number one. Number two, these are the kind of sources, so if you trust them, you could trust us. And yes, building trust in this semi-news space or news space is very difficult because you're again competing with the mainstream media. But I think the fact that I have been also called to the police station once without really doing anything wrong, because one of my bloggers wanted to expose something that was happening in a college, and because it was in 4 walls, she went anonymous, and I had to take all the brunt for it, obviously, because I will stand by my blogger. But I don't think the lines are very different then when it comes to new age media and mainstream media. If you are getting legal notices, you know that you have to be extremely careful of how you are curating the story, what you're putting out there. Just using words like alleged and supposed and as per sources does not help. You have to go and back it up with real proofs and evidences. So I don't know if I've answered your question. We are in a very similar space. I'd just say that.
No, I think you have to quite an extent. And thank you, Shreya. How about you? How do you?
I just want to, before Shreya shares her, I just want to, something came to my mind when Juhi was talking that about having people getting upset with your stories. It's interesting because since I'm doing women's stories, the most, the most objections we get are from the family members of those women. It's surprising, but the maximum number of offensive emails or angry emails that I have received are from brothers-in-laws and other people that she may have worked with, saying, how can you do this story? So I have learned a very new thing about publishing, that when it comes to women, professional is personal. She's always going to have these naysayers in her life, and she's going to have 100 other people trying to pull her down just because she's got a little bit of publicity. So this is something that I've learned in this particular position.
That's the beauty of our jobs, we learn something new every day. And Shreya, what about you? How do you negotiate this space?
So again, I'm just going to clarify our lens is mostly, lifestyle, food, alcobev, new age FMCG, right? So in terms of kind of like building your rule book of sorts of how do you kind of negotiate or how do you build content, here I'm going to kind of state 2 points here. One is, because we're in this space and a lot of brands, and I'll give you an example. So for example, in India, alcohol brands cannot necessarily advertise on traditional forms of media, meaning which they can't run a spot on TV. So which is why you'll suddenly see someone saying XYZ brand CDs and XYZ brands club soda. So they can't employ that on traditional media. But however, those rules are kind of a little bit more permissible on digital. So, for example, we can run a responsible campaign around how can you kind of responsibly savor this beverage. And here's what you need to know. You don't need to glug it down. This is how you drink it. This is the brand history, the advocacy, the legacy, blah, blah, blah. So digital kind of automatically allows you a little bit more wiggle room, so to speak, in that construct and that rule book and those kind of like legalities and the permissions of how do you tell the story. Now, knowing that, you automatically better have a sound kind of responsible filter, since you know that you can kind of like employ that on digital, whereas you can't do it on certain other traditional forms of media. And when I say that, I mean, I think knowing that you have the power to kind of use this tool and this instrument does not mean you kind of misuse it. So, which is why you need to be a little bit more sensitive and allowing a lot more responsible storytelling woven into that brand story when employing digital. Are there specific rules and guidelines and frameworks set by authorities, which I hope never happens, please? But no, not really. There are gentle guidelines and suggestive guidelines that are shared that every agency, in the space knows. However, it comes down to two things. One is your personal moral compass. And when I say personal, I mean the corporate moral compass. Where does that lean towards? And that kind of really drives your version of online or offline storytelling. So you better keep it like rock solid, and it should be no more than kind of 3 to 5 factors, because the more you have, the more confused you are. And when you are confused, we go back to that kind of charter of guidelines and that real kind of like company ethic that does this float our boat? And if yes, great. Like Juhi said, do your homework, be doubly, triply, quadruply kind of like sure that you can back that story up, and then roll with it. And if not, if it doesn't even kind of tick off one box out of those 3, it's never going to roll on our platforms. The other thing that kind of like drives those guidelines of online storytelling is actually what is your consumer want. So if you're a platform online today, you have this beautiful bank of data which acts as your index and your kind of like metrics, right? So you already know what is working and what isn't for your pool of audience. Now, assuming, and please, Juhi, Ekta, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we all seem to be working off a fairly dedicated and niche and exclusive kind of space of storytelling, right? Like we're not meant to be catering to like the trillions. I think we'd like to kind of like cater it to the millions. Having said that, then we know how to kind of like map out and slice our data, and we know exactly what is working for this data and what isn't. So for example, I know as a company and as a copywriter, I know that my audience likes tongue-in-cheek, smart kind of like storytelling. But at the same time, there's a very fine, thin line between being slightly tongue-in-cheek and then being a smart aleck piece of beep, and being sarcastic or disrespectful or, whatever it is. So we know what the flip side of all our consumer wants are, and we make sure that we kind of use and factor in those kind of like metrics and those consumer touch points to understand and build our own rule book for online storytelling. And then we don't deviate from it.
Interesting. It's really heartening to hear that and to see so much responsibility when it comes to all of you putting content out in a public space. And I am now getting questions from the audience, and they have a lot of questions to ask of you. And being a PR forum, of course, their first question is, how do you fit brand information that you get from PR teams? I'm sure you mentioned that you get a lot of press releases. I'm sure all of you are bombarded with those. How do you integrate it, if at all? And I'm putting that caveat in, if at all. I'm sure sometimes you do get interesting information also. So, Ekta, how would you go about it?
So I'll be honest with you, I don't, on eShe, you'll find maybe only 30 or 40% content that has been actually sent to us by PR press releases. And the reason is because a lot of press releases are not, they're not meant for my audience. And a lot of people send me a lot of press releases, but they don't understand my brand. And the very few, stories that do make it into the magazine, it's because the person sending that press release to me has made the effort to understand what I'm looking for and has put a little paragraph or has given me my angle in the beginning. And I think Sonali's team has become pretty expert at that. So they actually write a personal note to me before the press release begins, and they tell me how this woman is inspiring or how her story is inspiring. So for me, it's those kind of stories which do make it to the magazine. And also, I'm happy to create a feature if I find that it's an interesting story. If I find that there is something of value to the reader, there's something inspiring in it, I'm happy to. Sometimes I may sit on the story for a month or two, but I may come out with something bigger out of it because I have processed it. I've gotten more inputs from other people in similar industries. So I do take my time with developing a story if I feel that there's something worth it. I mean, I'll give you an example. In this current issue, there's a story, Vocal for Local, which is about the textile industry, how it's been struggling during the lockdown. And there were separate press releases that came to me over a period of time of these different NGOs and social enterprises that were working in the handloom sector. And it's only because, it all fell together in my head. And then, I went ahead and we contacted those PR people and we got the story together. But on its own, if you just send me a cold email, I'll probably get back to you months later. I mean, I'm not get back to you. But if you give me my angle that I'm looking for, if you tell me that there is a woman angle in this, there is a positive angle in this, there's an inspirational, uplifting story in this, I'm more likely to look at it in that sense.
Okay, thank you for that. I think you've benefited a lot of young PR professionals who might be listening to this today. Dewey, what about you? How do you handle this press release?
I am. I don't really carry a lot of press releases, or even as few as Ekta. We are, for us, given the fact that my second name is Garg and therefore Panya and therefore the money, I need to be sustainable. I need to be profitable. I need to be commercially successful. And making money in media is so difficult, especially when you're in this gray space competing with mainstream news websites. So we have a clear account for branded content. It's called Brand Voice. Whatever we put on Brand Voice is clearly paid for. We have a disclaimer at the end. We have a disclaimer at the end of the website, at the end of the article. Everywhere we mention this is syndicated content. This is Brand Voice, and what Brand Voice is. There is a complete mention of that even on our Advertise With Us page or About Us page. I'm forgetting which one. Number one. Number two is that sometimes some events are really cool, So there was a bubble formation walk, and that was such a cool idea of getting young people together, and it was tied in with a social cause. And we were so happy to be blog partners for them. So wherever we are blog partners now, that is completely barter. And that is when we are able to, give them that kind of mileage that they want through our platform. We do articles for them, we do social media shout outs, but it's mostly for events where we know that it will resonate with our audience. That is the second kind of content that we'll have, which is to do with brands. And the third kind of content is sometimes, yes, we get press releases which have a very strong human interest angle to it. And it's not about promoting a certain person. It's not about getting free publicity. It's really something that they're doing which is not common. And there is a human interest story. We did one of them for, I would say, keto, but then you can't do all 100 press releases you get. Initially they sent us a press release where they were raising money for one of the patients, and her story was definitely moving and very inspiring and very important. And that is a story we did for them, just because, again, we know that today youth is very tied in with social causes. They're environmentally very conscious. They want to do something good out there, and the story fit into our entire aspect of content creation. And that is the content that we carried completely on our own. It went from our editorial after obviously getting all the verifications in place. So that's the kind of work we generally do with PR firms, with social media agencies, digital agencies. They understand that everything has to go through the commercial route, so they try and pitch for the brand voice piece there.
How about you, Shreya? How much would you incorporate organic content or press release and content into your?
So we get, typically on a weekly basis, we get anywhere between 40 to about 75 kind of press releases a week. I don't see any harm in it. Do I run any of them? Zero. But I see great value because I love reading any and every story. So I'd read every press release if the title catches my eye. I want to say, but the run rate of me reading something and then running it as a story, I want to say that would be as dismal as 1 out of 10 times. I think, I just feel that as a PR agency, it's already kind of like a big challenge to straddle between a brand getting their story out in a slightly more, large format, universal fashion, and then kind of like, dispensing that off to a lot of content creators and producers, because everything's going to take different things from that same press release, right? What works for me is not going to work for Juhi. What works for Juhi is definitely not going to work for Ekta. And then the circle keeps going. So as a PR agency who's constructing a press release, it's already a tough job. So the least I can do is at least read it. I don't junk anything. What I actually find really valuable in a press release is, in fact, the high-res images that come with it. Because what it tells me is, I want to know that as a brand and as a creator, what are you hoping for me to see it? So then when I actually test it out in real life, at my own time, at my own pace, minus the pings from a lot of agents and who kind of like think it's okay to WhatsApp and say, hi, babe, gotten it, are you running it? And I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. But as in when I do it in my own time, at least I can go back to those high-res images and try kind of like use the maker's lens and say, this is what the maker was hoping for me to see, and this is what I'm kind of getting. And then I kind of like can do a cross comparison and then employ my own storytelling and my filtering process to write that story, to which goes off publicly, or even to offer private feedback to the agency or to the makers or to the brand. So I found it helpful in a very private sense. But do I run those stories? It's a dismal 1 out of 10.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think I'm going to tell people to keep sending those press releases. So that said, I want to come to a very interesting question, and that is, I'm clubbing 2 questions which have come in from the audience because I think they're pretty similar, which is, do you feel, and especially when it comes to paid brand collaborations, do you feel, how does that obviously pan out, because you do have to sustain the business and ultimately it is an organization that you run. Do you feel that these paid collaborations are therefore, what is the scope? How does it play out on you? And does it allow brands to tell more unique stories, therefore, through independent media or new media? Ekta,
Okay, I'm assuming that question is for me. Yeah. So, the one of the biggest things that I think PR folks should understand is that when you're talking to a new media, you're talking to an independent media, we don't have big funding. We don't come with the backing of a huge organization. I would think most of us are all bootstrapped. So For us, each story that we are doing is an investment. We're investing our time, we're investing our energy. I'm investing print, paper. So it's my personal investment. So unless I'm really, really convinced about this story or I'm being paid for it, there's nothing else in it for me to just, do any story. So every story for me is important in that sense. And unless it is fitting into my own purpose and vision of doing uplifting stories for women, yes, paid content is actually my only source of income because I don't have those huge numbers on the stands. And in any case, since lockdown, we've not been able to print in full quantity. So having those kind of numbers and going to an advertiser and saying, advertise with us is, that model of media has been failing in the last 10 years because advertisers have moved directly on social media with they are finding their customers directly. They don't need media for that. So the whole advertising model has collapsed in the last 10 years in terms of the media. And what I did realize very early on is that paid content is going to be my, because even if I don't have those numbers on in the stands, my stories do have a big reach. They're shared very widely, they're syndicated. So each story reaches wider places. So as long as I'm able to give a unique angle, I'm able to give strong reporting, a good story that people are going to read and share, I do have a product to sell. And so that is a good thing for brands because they get that very unusual kind of a unique kind of a position to be seen in. You know that it's not going to be repeated. It's not copy paste content. It's something new. But also having said that, because of these criteria, I have to be a little selective. I can't just take paid content from just about anyone. It has to be somebody who fits in with my profile. Again, like I said, I have to be proud of putting my name on it. So even if it's a woman, a businesswoman who wants to get her startup featured, it has to be something that fits in. I mean, I've rejected even a lot of women-led brands because what they're doing didn't really fit in with what I would like to feature on my site. And ever since we've set up base in Canada, we've actually got a lot of more interest from entrepreneurs in North America. And I think moving forward, that is probably going to be the direction I'm going to look at.
So we're looking at an international version now from your side, right? Lovely.
Yeah, international. Yeah.
Yes, I mean more of international content also. That's very nice to know, Ekta. Thank you. And what about you, Tui? Do you feel that these paid collaborations with brands actually allow you to help brands also create a better story with you?
So I think I have hit my head against the wall in terms of finding innovative revenue models to an extent that in one conference I actually asked that time Google CEO Rajan Anandan that what is the way that online media can earn money apart from paid subscription and ads, and he said there is no answer. That's the only way you earn through ads. So if we innovate a little, it's branded content, it's ads, and now it's events. I'm not an events person, so I don't think I'll go down that route in terms of commercialization or monetization. But yes, branded content is extremely, extremely important for us and a big source of monetization. As long as we are true to our reader that this is branded, this is a collaboration, this is paid for, I don't think they mind reading even an advertorial done in a very reader-centric way. So yes, none of us are going to shy away from branded content. It keeps us running. Sorry, what was the question again? I lost my thought. I went somewhere else.
No worries. I wanted to know that do these brand integrations actually allow brands to tell a more unique story through your?
I will use a case study for that. It was one of our movie collaborations. We've done around 6 block partnerships with Hindi movies, and there were 10 conversation starters we had to do for one of these movies. The best was that you work so closely with the creative team. You get the trailer before everyone else, you get the songs before everyone else, you get the teasers, you get everything in advance, and you're able to create stories which resonate not just with the movie promotion, not just with the conversation starters they wanted, but also with your audience. And that is the kind of content that you don't mind putting out. So I think even brands have way more flexibility in trying to churn out innovative, creative, and very relatable content on digital platforms versus doing that maybe on different platforms. I really wouldn't have, I wouldn't be the right person to say it, but yes, because we as founders work so closely with them in trying to design the entire content board, that I think it works well for both of us. So branded content gives them a lot of leeway in terms of going back and forth in trying to come out with the right piece for your platform.
Okay, thank you for that, Juhi. Shreya, we're coming to you, and I know your model is so interesting because you actually make it a completely immersive experience with brands. So can you share a little more about this for our viewers today?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, from day one, so for like now 8 years now, we've been kind of like straddling between the online and the offline world. So we don't rely, we never wanted to put our eggs in one basket. So even though today 2020 is like the year where every product and brand should kind of like flesh out online layers to their product, I still wouldn't like recommend 100%, go be online kind of centric. You need to kind of diversify your solutions. We've been, kind of like omni-channel from day one. So with that in mind, it has been revenue generating, self-sustaining, a model. I see great benefit in collaborative content and kind of like that paid content. But, I think the big caveat there is to that kind of like strategy when employing that strategy is very simple. You can't say yes to every brand that walks through your company doors with a big fat check, right? So every organization, and this is going to be unique. So Sonali, for you, there's certain kind of like no-goes, and for me, there's certain kind of no-goes, right? And that's something quite intrinsically unique to each of our kind of like core philosophies of our organization. So for example, will my company work with alcohol? Yes. Will my company work with sugar-related products, even though sugar is actually as dangerous as so many other things? Yes. But will my company ever associate with tobacco or even like the new age vape? No, not really. And we've been approached so many times with like the heftiest, most attractive kind of like checks coming our way. And we've said, you know what, it just doesn't stick with our core values. It doesn't resonate with my core audience. So I'm not gonna roll those kind of like collaborative content. So I think, it's a little bit of a funnel process, right? So you're kind of holding that funnel and you're the chief custodian of that funnel. Everything is going to come your way. And if it is coming your way, be thankful. That obviously means that brands appreciate the work you do. And then through that sifting process, those layers are basically kind of, deeply rooted with your brand Bible, something that I've been saying from day one. So you got to derive those kind of pickets and those rules from, your core strategy, your USPs. What are your, I mean, we're very flexible with our yeses, but we have very definitive hard no's, and those are non-negotiables for the company. And those are kind of like limited to 5 to 7. But those hard no's and those non-negotiables act as our kind of like picket stations through that funnel process. So the kind of like paid content on that collaborative content that finally trickles out of that funnel are the brands whose kind of value proposition or whose core values in some way or form match with ours. And that when that happens, you have impactful, magical content coming out, because what's happening is that we become those intermediaries for those brands to kind of like amplify their story online or offline, whatever you employ. And then the beauty of new media is that it allows you to kind of like use the insane amplification of the online, and then muddle that with the intimacy of offline, and then you really get to harness that never-ending magic of a good brand story which deserves to be told. So if there's an invoice attached to it, I don't see my end consumer being usually rattled by that, as long as they know and they trust consistent fact-checking, consistent research, and some form of consistency in the kind of brands we end up working with. So, and I think that, today's consumer and reader is a lot more keen and discerning than ever before. They can pull out things that we weren't pulling out even like, say, 5 years back. So there's no wiggle room with trying to kind of trick your end user and your end reader and your end viewer today. So as long as you're consistent with the quality of storytelling online or offline and how you kind of use those tools of new media towards your brand, towards your clients, it works. I see great power in that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been so enlightening to hear you, the three of you, speak. There's so much clarity in your vision. There is so much belief in what you are putting out for your audience. There is so much commitment to your followers, and it truly comes out from all three of you. It's been a very enlightening session for us, and new media is something we're all learning and we're all evolving together. Unfortunately, we have actually today run out of time. It's been such an interesting, and we managed to, through each question, cover multiple topics. So I'd really like to thank the three of you. And if you had a quick one word or one sentence thing to leave our audience with, I'm going to request all of you to just say it all in one sentence because we are almost out of time. So Ekta.
Well, I'm just going to share the whole brand concept of eShe. Shine your light. Do what you have to do.
Thank you so much. What about you, Juhi?
I have nothing to say. I'm looking forward to my Saturday and Sunday. I have to go shopping. That's all from me.
More about you. What about you, Shreya?
If you're a brand, if you're an agency, if you're an organization, tell the good story. And if you're a reader, viewer, consumer, then allocate your likes and your views and your shares towards those good stories.
Okay, so I'd really like to thank the three of you. More power to the new media, to the independent media. And I do hope, as Ekta said, you shine your light out there to followers, audiences. I think this has been a very nice session today. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us on PRPOI Facebook.
Sonali, what is your one line?
Sorry?
What is your one line for us?
My one line is that I have learned so much today. Even it's a constant learning, and it's so lovely to see the three of you be so passionate about what you do. I'm really floored to be able to be the moderator today.
Thank you. You've been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was so good meeting you all.
Same here. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you from PRPOI for another Saturday session. We'd like to thank our media partners as well, PR Moment, for being our media partners for this wonderful session. Thank you for joining us today. Have a lovely Saturday.